Hello everybody and welcome back to Expert Examiner IELTS. My name is Glyn and in this video we're going to give some feedback on Vadim's speaking test. So let's jump straight in. Good afternoon, my name is Glyn. Would you please tell me your full name?
My full name is Vadim.
And what should I call you?
You can just call me Vadim.
Cool. We all know this part of the test isn't measured. Don't need to add any extra information. Fine. Okay, thank you, Vadim. Now, in this first part of the test, I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself. Do you work or do you study?
I'm a high school student. I'm graduating in 2 years.
Cool, it's enough of an answer, right? Some people give long, extended answers. We don't need that. We just want to know if you work or study, because then we understand which set of questions to go to next. And what subjects do you study at school?
Well, I study at a public school. I study a lot of compulsory subjects
Cool, compulsory subjects, good stuff.
ranging from math
Ranging from, nice little participle.
to Russian, for example.
From to
And I think the most interesting subject that I
and like that American pronunciation of and really nice.
study is English. I love English. I love everything about it.
One thing I will say is that when we talk about things that we love, usually we have a bit more emotional range. Like, oh, I love English. I love everything about it. There are some like dramatic pauses or extra emphasis on strong verbs like love. And I will just say that the candidate, it just seems like super laid back. Like, yeah, I love English. I love everything about it. And it just feels maybe there's just a sometimes when candidates are very, very well prepared, it feels a little bit like scripted answers sometimes when candidates are super well prepared. And Vadim is a well prepared candidate. Kudos to his teacher and kudos to him for that. But just listen again to how he talks about, try to feel Vadim's enthusiasm and passion for English. Tell me if you feel it.
Subject that I study is English. I love English. I love everything about it.
Because I don't really feel that enthusiasm. I hear it, right? I love English. I love English. I love everything about it, but I don't feel the enthusiasm. And sometimes, that's a good place to score with pronunciation. If you can express your emotions through your pronunciation, that can really help to push towards those highest marks. But of course, this is early in the test, and by itself, this isn't enough to say that Vadim doesn't have band 9 pronunciation. But certainly, as an examiner, it's something I'm immediately thinking a little bit about his emotive range here. And what are you planning to do when you finish your studies?
I think the first thing that I'm planning to do is
It just sounds a bit strange. I think the first thing that I'm planning to do, well, I think is a modal clause which expresses some type of maybe doubt, right? I think I'm planning to do. I think I might or I think I will, but I think I'm planning to do. It just sounds a little bit strange, but it's the type of strange type of construction I might hear from my dad or my brother or something like that. So I don't dismiss it as a mistake. It just sounds a bit strange, right? I think I'm planning to. I think I'm going to. Fine, but I think I'm planning to sounds a bit strange.
try to apply for different universities. I want to get accepted to some prestigious university.
Cool, get accepted to, nice use of get in the passive instead of be. That's really good stuff.
Outside of Uzbekistan, and then go abroad.
Just notice this outside of Uzbekistan. His pronunciation is Uzbekistan. Now, Uzbekistan is your country, not my country, right? As I understand, in the English-speaking world, we call it Uzbekistan. Now, sometimes when I'm speaking Russian, for example, people ask me where I'm from, and I say, "Yeah, he's Wales," because Wales is my country. But I don't say Wales like it's pronounced in the UK. I say Wales, Wales, like it's pronounced in Russian. And so we should be just a little bit careful of that outside of Uzbekistan. Stress on the stan. Now, again, is it a big problem? No, but I didn't want to raise this point because of the wrong or the unusual stress on Uzbekistan, but just because outside of Uzbekistan, just for me, just sounded just slightly unclear. Just listen here.
University outside of Uzbekistan, and prestigious university outside of Uzbekistan.
And maybe it's okay outside of Uzbekistan. Just Yeah, it just seems slightly strange. Now, of course, keep in mind that I'm focusing on tiny details here because I know Vadim's level is super high. And so most of my focus in this video is, can I find any reason not to give Vadim a 9, right? I know that Vadim is a C2 level English user. I just know this because I remember the test that we had. And so now I'm just thinking, well, if what would stop him from getting the 9? So that's why I focus on those tiny little details. I wouldn't, if this was a band 7 candidate even, I wouldn't even mention those tiny little issues with pronunciation.
And then go abroad and study there.
Let's move on and talk go abroad, knowing that we don't use any preposition there. Usually we use go to a museum, go to school, and so on, but go abroad without to. Get about your free time now. Do you have a lot of free time?
These days, I'm preparing for a lot of language exams, like Korean and English.
Cool. These days I'm preparing for good stuff.
And because of that, I don't really have a lot of free time.
Cool. Nice reference, nice cohesion. Because of that, I don't have a lot of free time.
But I used to have.
And also notice the connected speech there. I don't have a lot of free time. I don't have a lot of free time. It's connected. We don't hear I don't have a lot of. We hear I don't have a lot of free time.
And because of that, I don't really have a lot of free time.
I don't really have a lot of free time. I don't really have a lot of free time. Really good connected speech there.
But I used to have lots
Again, I used to have, linking that used to. I used to have.
of free time, lots of hobbies, and like a couple of years ago when I didn't care about studies that much.
And do you prefer spending your free time alone or with other people?
It depends. When I want to socialize with my
Cool. So I love this. If you use this, it depends. We should always follow it up with an if or a when clause, and a candidate does that.
friends, when I want to discuss something, I usually prefer to
Again, when I want to, not when I want to, but when I want to.
go to different cafes with my friends and then talk about, I don't know, ideas, what is happening in our lives. But when I just need some, sanctuary
And notice good intonation here, but when I just need some sanctuary time, it's really good that intonation that expresses the contrast. It's not just the word but that expresses the contrast. It's also but when I want to. He expresses that contrast through his intonation, which is a very subtle but very good use of intonation, very natural.
time, when I want to be alone, I usually spend my
I will say sometimes his twos are a little bit fully pronounced. So in English, we have like full forms of words and weak forms of words, rather of vowel sounds, right? So if we think of the word can, for example, right, the neutral form of can is can, and that's the full form can. But very often in connected speech, when we talk about, what can you do? Oh, I can swim. I can swim. Suddenly that can becomes a can. I can swim. I can swim. So we use this weak form of can. I can swim. Now, in with other words, for example, like this word to, the full form is to, 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 but the weak form is to, to. When I want to discuss, when I want to discuss, to discuss, to discuss. Do notice the candidate does pronounce the full form of to. Now, sometimes this happens when we have what we call careful speakers. I don't think Vadim is a particularly, even though he's very, very accurate, I wouldn't categorize him in a negative sense as a careful speaker. But I do think maybe some of his twos could become to. If I want to discuss, I'm going to the gym, so changing that to the t. Now again, you might think, look, Glyn, why on earth do you care? Can you get a band 9 in pronunciation and still use the full form of to? Absolutely. But as a body of evidence, it might be the case that some of these small issues add up to create enough evidence that an examiner might think, you know what, that pronunciation might have been a little bit better. He could have had slightly more emotive range. His speech could have been slightly more connected, and that might be a reason to give the 8 instead of giving the 7, instead of giving the 9. So, just notice a bit more of Vadim's 2s as we go on. Could they be shorter? And again, is it important? No, but we know getting a band 9 is so hard. So hard. getting 8.5 is crazy difficult, but going from that 8.5 to that perfect 9, whew, tough. Anyway, let's keep going.
My time at home, relaxing, chilling, not doing much.
Cool, relaxing, chilling, like it. And if you had a week off and you could do anything, what would you do?
Oh, that's a great question.
I believe Vadim. When Vadim says that's a great question, I believe that he actually thinks it's a great question. I don't know whether he does think it's a great question or not, but I would say that with 90% of candidates, when they tell me that's a good question, it's quite obvious that it's padding, it's buying time, and that it's insincere. Like, what do you do in your free time? Oh, that is a great question. But I think the question of like, if you had a week off and you could do anything, what would you do? That is kind of an unusual question, and maybe it's justified here for the candidate to say, "Oh, that's a good question." Usually, I don't like those type of answers, but I think here it works fine.
Um, since I've been putting so much effort into studying recently,
Cool. So using since instead of because and using that present perfect continuous, I've been putting and also put effort into something. Really good collocation. Natural language is just, and the accuracy and precision of that vocab and grammar is great. I will say, is the delivery free flowing, or is it evidence that perhaps he's putting together the grammar in his head? I don't know. You tell me. Let's listen again. You tell me if this is naturally emerging from the candidate, or if he's thinking, oh, this would be a nice place to use present perfect continuous. You tell me. Let's have a look. If you had a week off and you could do anything, what would you do?
oh, that's a great question. Since I've been putting so much effort into studying recently, I'm not really sure what I'm interested uh, in.
I'm not really sure what I'm interested in. So he just finds that preposition. So that doesn't emerge naturally. That is certainly the candidate thinking, oh, interested requires a preposition. Which preposition do we use with interested? Be interested in something. Okay, so not really sure what I'm interested in. Almost like he forgot to use the preposition and then used it. Now, would I punish him there for grammar? No. Would I punish him there for vocab? No. Would I punish him there for fluency? No, unless it happened quite a few times. For me, a couple of slips like that are fine. And again, it's the type of thing that we would expect, native speakers, L1 users to sometimes, well, uh, now, maybe I wouldn't expect L1 users to forget those prepositions and add it. But again, one instance of something like this isn't going to be enough to drop your score. So don't worry about it. And, he got that preposition in the end.
Like, I'm not sure about my hobbies, but I think I would do some sports because
Nice use of but, dropping that T, but, elision, but. I think I would, but, the glottal stop, but, cool.
recently I've not been doing anything related to.
Cool. I've not been doing, again, we've had present perfect continuous in the positive. Now we have it in the negative. I've not been doing. And also, instead of I haven't been doing, candidates used I've not been doing, which is perfectly acceptable. Nice.
Sporting activities or something else. Maybe I would just call my friends and go outside.
And notice Vadim is staying in this hypothetical mood here. Maybe I would. He doesn't drop into I will or I can. He's staying in that subjunctive would type of stuff. Again, and he's stretching that out over long stretches of speech. Good stuff.
Play some basketball, which is my favorite sporting activity. So probably something like this.
Probably. Really love this. Probably something like this. Probably. Sometimes even in the UK, people write this Prolly. Probably. I'll probably see you tomorrow. Nice. Let's talk about colors now. Do you have a favorite color? I hate that question. I hate that question in real life. I hate that question in tests, but sometimes it appears. Do you have a favorite color? No, I'm not 9 years old.
Uh, I'm not sure, but if I had to pick one, I guess
Cool. Again, if I had to pick one, good stuff.
I would go with black.
Again, go with it. There is a bit of hesitation there, but I think this is hesitation to prepare content. It is not hesitation to prepare language.
Because, well, all of my clothes are black. It is a neutral color. It doesn't scream anything.
Cool. I love this idea of colors screaming something. That's very natural.
Like it is a very neutral color, and I like something that is.
A little bit of repetition, right? He's already said it's a neutral color. Do we need to say it again? Probably not. Probably not.
isn't you know too explicit.
Explicit is the right word. Yeah, too cool. And are there any colors that you don't like very much?
I don't like really bright colors, specifically, greenish or bluish,
Cool. Love that suffix ish on the end of colors, bluish, greenish.
which are, like, uh, kind of too, I guess, they're screaming that you're like that you need attention from other people.
Cool. Again, we've had that screaming. I think it's okay to repeat it here.
I don't like this. I like when a person doesn't stand out.
I like when. I like when okay. I have heard L1 users use I like when. I used to teach that it was a mistake and we should use I like it when. But I have noticed more and more L1 users using this I like when. I still prefer I like it when. I like it when. Dummy it. But I like when. I've heard L1 users use it, so I can't say it's a mistake really.
And especially when it comes to outfits.
Cool. We've had that specifically, and that especially makes good use of these adverbs. And when it comes to, I really love little cohesive things like this. Like when it comes to, like, oh, so nice. Not just about or regarding, but when it comes to. Yeah, good stuff.
Something really, really low key, I would really prefer
Low key, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
those kind of colors.
And for me, words like low key are far more impressive than words like, I don't know, an essentiality or something like that. I know a lot of candidates when they're trying to kind of boost their language, they try to learn either very like heightened colorful bits of language like idiomatic expressions like I was on cloud nine or I was down in the dumps, or they try to learn some like long Latin based words like I don't know, pseudo anti-disestablishmentarianist. Okay, they don't really learn those ones, but they try to learn a lot of Latin based words because they tend to be longer, and they maybe sound more official and formal. But for me, words like low key are just low key amazing. Cool. Yeah, I guess Vadim spends a bit of time on the internet. And are there any colors that you strongly associate with your country?
With my country, maybe the colors of my flag. There are many colors, but probably green, because Uzbekistan is actually considered to be a country with a lot of vegetation,
Cool is actually considered to be really, really good stuff, is considered to be, and also vegetation, all good stuff.
a lot of green spaces. So I think I would choose green.
Cool. So just summarizes the answer at the end, nicely wraps it up there. Okay, thank you. Now, all right, so some thoughts on that is the end of part one, right? In this next part of the test, yeah. All right, so some thoughts on part one. Vadim is a very impressive user of English. Vocab appears to be at band 9. Grammar, I'd like to see just a little bit more range. Accuracy of grammar is amazing. No systemic mistakes. I don't know if I even spotted any grammatical mistakes. Accuracy is amazing. Certainly at band 8 for grammar. We have had a decent range. We've had like a bit of present perfect continuous. We've had a bit of modality where we're in that like would world, that hypothetical world. Some nice passive constructions like to get. I forgot the passive he used with get, but he did use a passive with get, and also is considered to be. All of that is example. All of those are examples of complex structures. We also have complex sentences where he uses little linkers, like when it comes to link different clauses, as well as the usual like and but so and so on. Yeah, so grammar seems to be at that between 8 and a 9. Just would like to see a little bit more range for a 9 perhaps, but plenty of time to exploit that. Fluency, some tiny noticeable hesitations, but I guess generally those hesitations are, I think, to prepare content, not to prepare language. There was one case where maybe the hesitation before using present perfect continuous, maybe. But for me, yeah, Probably enough. I think his responses are natural, and just because not every sentence is like perfectly read from a script, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have band 9 fluency, right? In spontaneous language production, we do expect to see a little bit of reformulation, a little bit of repetition of ideas, a little bit of hesitation. We always expect to see that from spontaneous speech production. Pronunciation is the part where I'm thinking, yeah, probably closer to an 8. Candidate has a bit of an American accent. That's not his fault, and there's nothing wrong with the American accent. Um, just perhaps, perhaps that little bit of lack of emotive range, and perhaps some parts which are slightly less connected might be enough to drop to an 8. But I don't know. For me, between 8 and a 9 for the pronunciation so far. But let's not get too worried about scores. I'm not going to mention anything else about scores until we get to the end of the test. But I think in 90% of cases, after part 1, I can tell what the candidate's level is, and I think most people can do this. There's nothing special about me. Most teachers who've been teaching English for even like 2 years or 3 years, after a few questions, you can kind of, you can put them in that A, B, or C. A, they're really struggling. B, they're okay. C, they're super strong. I think, even if you're not a teacher, you can recognize that, like, oh, that person speaks English well, that person speaks English okay, or that person has difficulty with English. So there's nothing special when I say that, I can judge a candidate's level quite quickly. Nothing special about me for being able to do that. Anyway, let's get to part 2. Let's see what the candidate needs to do first of all. So he has to describe a game that he enjoyed playing as a child. Notice that this is the past tense, so what the game was, who you played it with, how often you played it. But it's kind of strange, isn't it? Because the task is to describe a game, and so there will be a strange focus between, on the one hand, what the game kind of is in general, and then also that those moments in the past as a child. So who you played it with, how often you played it. Those things activate past time, and say why you enjoyed playing it so much. So a bit of like emotive language. We often see this. The last question is trying to get the candidate to produce personal or emotive language. Will we get that from the candidate? But kind of a tricky one to think about in terms of, you have to describe the game. So if the game is badminton, you might talk about what badminton is in the present tense. And then who you played it with and how often you played it will be in the past. But okay, let's see how the candidate does. Your talk.
Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike is
Sorry. And I will let you know when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please?
Yeah. So as a child, I've played a lot of games.
As a child, I've played a lot of games. Now, Vadim is I. He said he was graduating in 2 years. Does that mean he's 16? And if he says as a child, I have played a lot of games, maybe present perfect is okay here. I still think the way that the task is set up, IELTS is aimed at adults, and so when they ask you to talk about the time you played as a child, past simple is better than present perfect. But since Vadim is only 16, I guess we could let him off with present perfect.
But one of the most, common games for me to play was Counter-Strike. So Counter-Strike is a computer game.
Cool. I love that he's not assuming that I know what Counter Strike is. I do know what Counter Strike is, but I love that he's assuming that I don't, and so he's showing paraphrasing. He's explaining what exactly Counter Strike is.
And as a child, I
Maybe mention a little bit more. So Counter Strike is a computer game, and it's a first person shooter. So basically, you're like running around, and you have a bunch of different guns, and the other players also have these guns, right? One of those target questions there is, you should say what the game was. And so, Counter Strike, it's a computer game, but maybe activate a bit more vocab, and maybe just explain a little bit more of what Counter Strike is. 2 minutes is plenty of time.
did not have a lot of friends. I usually
Did not have a lot of friends. Good use of did not. If you've seen the movie The room, you might know, did not instead of didn't.
spend my time at home, especially in front of the computer. And then one
Cool. In front of the computer, all good stuff.
day just came across,
Came across, very, very, very natural, very appropriate, very precise phrasal verb.
a game that my brother was playing. Um,
Cool. A game that my brother was playing. Good post modification of the noun there. The game, head noun, that my brother was playing. Cool. Relative clause.
it was that exact game, and I got interested in it. At first, I was not good at it whatsoever.
Cool. Love it. Not good at it whatsoever. Very precise.
But then, as I've started familiarizing myself with the concept of the
Not present perfect here. So not as I have started familiarizing myself, but as I started familiarizing myself. I I guess Vadim knows the difference between present perfect and past simple, but I know there is a lot of a lot of English language teachers teach this like, oh, we use present perfect if something has a result in the present. And for me, I understand that that rule sometimes applies, but that rule isn't a universal rule of present perfect. And sometimes that leads to candidates and students in general, or English users, misusing this present perfect. In the Russian and post Soviet, former Soviet countries, I see that mistake a lot, the use of present perfect instead of past simple, even at very high levels.
game and with the mechanics. I kind of
But still, let's not overlook the great vocab here. Let's just listen again.
It was that exact game, and I got interested in it. At first, I was not good at it whatsoever, but then as I've started familiarizing myself with the concept of the game
To familiarize oneself with something. Very nice.
and with the mechanics,
Mechanics, good stuff.
I kind of got the hang of it, and
Cool, got the hang of it. Are we? Is the fluency just breaking down for the candidate to try to find this really precise vocab? I mean, the vocab is super precise. I just kind of got the hang of it. Maybe there is a just the slightest breakdown of fluency for the candidate to choose the absolute most precise piece of vocab. Is it affecting the fluency slightly? Slightly, yeah, just slightly.
and then I became a lot better. I have started playing almost like professionally. I found my team.
Again, I have started playing professionally. Um, Present perfect or past simple here? Are we talking about like recently? I mean, maybe it is. Maybe because Vadim is young, maybe it does feel so recent to him that present perfect is okay. And so I will, I will excuse that. I still think past simple is better here because we're in a narrative. We're telling a story. We tend not to use present perfect when we're in our narratives, in our past narratives. But I will let that one off.
And we enjoyed playing, spending time together. That was a nice way. That was a nice way to socialize, really. And
So, okay, it was a nice way to socialize. It kind of feels like candidate has kind of come to the end of his speech here. I often mention that like B1s kind of run out of steam after about 20 or 30 seconds. But sometimes it can happen to higher level candidates where, if you haven't practiced doing speaking part two like 100 times, you might not know exactly what 2 minutes feels like. You might not know exactly, how to take notes that help you to get through the whole 2 minutes. And I do feel like people often like front end this part two where they're so eager to get out all of the ideas on their notes, or maybe if they're feeling nervous, they're speaking a little bit more quickly than they usually would. And then after about 1 minute, it feels like they get to the end and then they're just like tagging things on. I don't know if that's the case with Vadim, but it certainly feels like, now he's said why he enjoyed playing it so much because it helped him to socialize a lot, but we still have a lot of time to fill.
then, like the darker side of my, gaming, of my gaming experience came in.
Okay, so now he's talking about the darker side of his gaming experience, and I question how on topic is this? The darker side of my experience. Now, the task, of course, is to describe a game that you enjoyed playing as a child, which should be a positive thing. So we don't want, a little bit of, and maybe it's relevant, right? The darker side, but there are certainly some people that might feel like, well, if you're talking about a game that you enjoyed playing, why are you now talking about why is the focus shift to the darker side of things? Um, but for me, it's still on topic, but perhaps not perfectly on topic.
Like
Because and also to add, the last thing is to say like why you enjoyed playing it so much. It should be a positive thing.
I got addicted to playing this game.
Cool, get addicted to doing something. Very good.
Really, I used to spend like hours and hours on end
Hours and hours on end. Love it.
playing Counter.
That nice little adverbial phrase on end. Hours and hours on end. Weeks and weeks on end. Years and years on end. Very nice. Not many people know that adverbial phrase.
Strike, and I did not enjoy it whatsoever. Like it really affected my social life, my personal life, and also I did not have enough time to study at school.
Just seems slightly strange in terms of coherence. One reason why he enjoyed playing Counter Strike is that it was really a social experience. And now he's saying that it destroyed his social life. So there is a slight possible contradiction.
So I completely dismissed.
But it might be that there was a positive social aspect at the beginning, but then when he got addicted, it became more antisocial. I can understand that.
Whatever like my teacher were saying and were recommending me, especially like my mentors, including
I don't know if he's on script or if he's off script, or not on script, but still using his notes. I think his notes, and I don't know, but I think his notes probably ended with it was a good social thing for me. And I think now he's kind of freestyling and thinking, well, I'll talk about the negative experiences. And now he's off his notes and just trying to think on the spot.
my parents. So then, because of this addiction, I started spending a lot of money.
Again, because of this addiction, I've started. And again, for me, present perfect isn't quite appropriate here. Past simple should be used. Because of this, I started, not I have started. I have started kind of suggests that the problem is still with him. Um, but yeah, mainly we're in a narrative, and when we're in that narrative, we don't really want to use present perfect. And so for me, this could potentially, I really thought the candidate had band 9 grammar, but now I'm between that 8 and 9. Just that those, 3 or 4 mistakes possibly with present perfect. Is that enough to pull it down? It might be.
In the game itself. So at one point, I simply like uh, I would say stole my mom's plastic card, then like tapped in all the numbers, CVV or something, and
Yeah.
then I bought
Thank
a
you.
lot of
Okay, so that's the end of part 2. I don't think I have too many more comments to add. I will say just that present perfect versus past simple is a noticeable mistake. I I did notice it the first time during the test, and I was looking forward to watching the test back just to measure that use of present perfect and how much of a problem it was. I also feel like it's just the talk is a little bit front ended where Vadim gets through the information connected to the notes early and then has to spend about 40 seconds then or 35 seconds adding information. And again, I don't know if that's true or not, but if that is true, then Vadim could benefit from just practicing more with part 2. And when you're this is the beautiful thing about having such a high level of English. Vadim has a super high level of English. It will not be difficult for him to change his strategy and fill 2 minutes. If you're like a band 6, if you're in that like middle of B2 or a band 5.5 at the lower end of B2, finding strategies for part 2 can become a little bit trickier. But for someone like Vadim, I think it will be so easy. So if you do feel, Vadim, that you got through like everything you wanted to say quite early, just keep in mind that, probably when you're under pressure, maybe you speak a little bit too quickly. Think about how you can extend the information connected to the pink questions. Think about how you could develop those a little bit more before getting to the last question. Because for me, you went through them, you went through the questions fairly quickly. Yeah. Let's get into part three. We're already 35 minutes in. Thank you. All right, so you've been describing a game that you enjoyed playing as a child. Let's talk about games in general now. Firstly, why is it good for children to play games with other children?
Well, I think it is a great way to socialize.
Cool. It's a great way to socialize. We have a very clear idea. Let's see the development.
I mean, if children lack contact with other, like with their peers,
Cool. He's developing, and nice use of I mean, which is a nice little signpost to say, I'm going to explain what I mean.
they will not kind of understand the emotions. They will not be able to read them in the future. But if the contrary happens, they'll kind of have a lot of friends who support them, and in the future they might as well keep those connections.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fine answer, right? It helps you to socialize, and then he talks about what might happen if you don't socialize and what will happen if you do socialize. I think that's fair.
And this might help them, kind of have reliable people to trustworthy people to talk about different things, what is happening in their lives.
Trustworthy people to talk about different things with. Just missed that preposition.
But if children did not have any friends, they did not play in general as children, they would not have so many opportunities in the future to
Cool. So nice conditional again. If they didn't da 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 and they didn't da da da, then they would not da 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 da. Cool. Second conditional. Good stuff.
uh, well, to make new friends in the first place because they would lack those social skills to make new friends
And do you think it's also important for children to play with toys on their own?
on their own. For the sake of developing fine motor skills, I think it is really important.
And again, for me, it's not the answer I would go with, but I love the language, right? For the sake of developing fine motor skills. I don't have children. I don't plan to have children, but if I had a child, I don't think I would say like, oh, play with these toys on your own so you can develop your fine motor skills. For the answer I would go with is about improving imagination, because when you play with toys by yourself, if you like play with dolls or action figures, you often have to create some type of narrative which helps you to get into like storytelling and story building, and it helps you to activate different parts of your imagination, where you build like good characters and bad characters, and you might have sense of justice and things like this. Yeah, but maybe that's because I'm not a hard science person. I'm very much a soft science person. Linguistics, philosophy, history. This is where my education is. So maybe that's where I go. I don't know if Vadim has more of an interest in hard science and he's interested in, kids developing their fine motor skills. But again, it's perfectly fine. We can have this disagreement. I would not mark him down just because I disagree. I have been accused of that before, where some people said, "Oh, you gave me a lower mark because you disagree with my opinion." No, in this case, I disagree with Vadim's point of view, but Vadim's point of view is absolutely fine. I just disagree with it, but I wouldn't mark him down.
Because when children play alone without anybody's help, they can kind of um, develop some fine movements of their hands. They can get better at
And that is true. I think that is fair, right? If you play with like Lego and things, you have to stick things together. That's fair.
well, just doing something manually, right? So that's also very important. And sometimes children also need some uh, time to, they need to spend some time alone without anybody because they might have some personal thoughts that they don't want to share. And it is also important to give children that opportunity.
Yeah, fair, fair. And what kind of games are more suitable for adults?
adults, I think nowadays with the development of
I do like the fact that, Vadim's way of buying time is to repeat parts of the question, like on their own. Adults. I noticed this with a few different candidates. I like it. I think that's a perfectly natural way of responding. Adults? Well, da 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 da. On their own? Well, da 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 da. Cool.
technology, adults don't really have much time to spend outside. Like
Okay, let's just have a listen again to this answer.
I think nowadays with the development of technology, adults don't really have much time to spend outside.
Okay, so what type of games are more suitable for adults? I think with the development of technology, adults don't have enough time or don't have much time to spend outside. Okay, so we're fronting the reason here. So he's laying the ground and then I guess he's going to answer. I always prefer direct answers first and development, but okay, let's see where this goes.
Like if they play different games, those are online games
Okay,
conventionally. So they need just to go outside, play some uh, physical games. I would say real games because
cool. So which games are suitable for adults? Real games, physical games, outside games? Which games? Still waiting a little bit waiting for the
you
answer.
know back in the day you didn't really have a choice. You only could play some sports outside and games related to sports as well. So
Games related to sports.
I think that would be really crucial for adults to, just refrain from their sedentary lifestyles and start spending more time outside in general.
Okay, again, you can say refrain from the sedentary lifestyle. Great language. For me, it's a little bit heightened. I don't think Vadim needs to try any harder to access the vocab. For me, that just feels just slightly a little bit like, he's trying to activate this refrain from one's sedentary lifestyle. And I don't know if it's really like super on topic, right? What kind of games are more suitable for adults? Well, for me, I think like more complex strategic games are suitable. That could be like a board game like chess, but it might be a computer game like where you have, like a military game where you have to like command an army or something, which requires a lot of thought. It's not just about like pressing buttons really quickly. That might be a more straightforward, simpler answer and a more direct answer.
And games would be a nice way to do that.
Don't you think it's a bit of an overgeneralization to say that adults generally have a sedentary lifestyle? So, whenever I feel, oh, not always, but oftentimes, when I feel that candidates are just saying something for the purpose of using that language, in part three, I always like to dig in a little bit deeper on that, especially with higher level candidates. So, the candidate has used this like it will help them to refrain from their sedentary lifestyle. And I think, well, is that a point of view that the candidate really has? Or is it just a bit of language that he's trying to activate? And so, because I have that little bit of doubt, I just want to call him on it and ask him, like, well, do do adults really generally have sedentary lifestyles? Maybe they do.
Um, I think if we are talking generally, it is nice to say that
Not that it's nice to say that, but maybe it's fine to say that.
because, most of the adults they have different jobs, and those jobs
And I just think maybe very often I notice this that when you call candidates on certain issues like this, their ideas just break down a little bit. Like most of the adults have different kinds of jobs. I don't know exactly what that means, right? Most of the adults have different kinds of jobs.
are usually connected to offices, or they simply have not blue collar jobs but white collar jobs. So
I mean, lots of adults have blue collar jobs too.
they spend most of their times at work, and when they get home, they don't
And notice that they spend most of their times at work instead of most of their time at work. So maybe it's a little bit cruel, but you could expect to see this, right? When examiners want to know if you're a band 9 or band 8 or a band 7, sometimes we have to put the candidate under a little bit more pressure. That might mean selecting a more difficult question, but it might also mean digging in on something doubtful that the candidate has said and challenging the candidate. And just notice Vadim's level just slightly breaks down, where he's kind of making slightly less sense, where he says most of the adults work in different jobs, like in offices, they blue collar, not blue collar, but white collar. They spend most of their times. So this part is just slightly less accurate and slightly less coherent than the previous parts of the test.
Have enough energy to kind of go outside and well, basically indulge in some activity, right? So that would be important for them to well, simply do that instead of sitting in front of a screen and playing some virtual games.
Mm-hmm. So I think he has performed well under that pressure. I mean, not easy to deal with it when you're being challenged, but it is noticeable that some things just drop off slightly. Let's talk a little about computer games then. Some people say that playing computer games is a complete waste of time. Do you agree? So I'm trying to get back to something a bit friendlier now.
Not for everybody. Like for some people actually make a living by playing computer games.
Cool. Make a living. Make a living doing something is probably more common than make a living by doing something. They make a living playing computer games, but by playing computer games, I have no problem with it.
Special professionals. But to be honest, the number of those people who actually manage to make a living by playing computer games is
What a wonderfully complex subject. The number of people who actually manage to make a living by playing those computer games is wonderfully complex subject.
tiny. Like only a few people can do that. So I guess that would be an overgeneralization to say that everybody suffers from playing games. Like especially considering
I really love that he's used this overgeneralization because I asked him, like, don't you think that's an overgeneralization? And I don't know if it's just a coincidence or if he's managed to recycle it, but awesome, awesome.
the fact that a lot of people are actually benefiting from this emotionally. Like they can socialize through playing computer games. They can derive some, emotional arousal, let's say.
I don't know if arousal is quite the right word. They can derive some emotional arousal, maybe some emotional stimulation or some emotional benefits or something. Arousal, I kind of know what you mean with arousal, but for me, that word has slightly different connotations. But okay.
Like they kind of get happier. Sometimes for people, it is the best thing to do actually to play a game after a long, tiring day at
And,
work.
and finally, how do you think computer games might change in the future?
In the future, I
Again, in the future. So I think it's fine as a strategy just to buy a little bit of time to repeat some keywords in the question, no problem.
don't really have
What I don't like is when the candidate repeats the whole question back, but just repeating a few keywords, absolutely fine.
a good concept of like what computers game are like now because I don't
Computers game or computer games? Again, for me, just a slip. I will ignore that. Computers game. He means to say computer games, but I know that he knows that. I can forget about it.
play them usually. But if I were to assume, I'd say that
Cool. If I were to assume, very nice use of this like odd form of the second conditional. If I were to do something, be to do, be to be to do, be to know.
most of the games would be uh, played via virtual glasses. You know those uh,
Cool. He uses virtual glasses. Now, of course, he means like VR headsets or VR goggles. And it's fine that he uses glasses. He's going to attempt to explain.
glasses which allow you to actually immerse into this gaming app.
Called glasses which allow you to immerse. So great use of paraphrase here. We know that to get band 7 or higher in vocab, you need to show this ability to paraphrase. And yeah, really, really great. And it's a great example, or it's very instructive here that if you don't know a word for something, doesn't matter. If you can explain that thing, that word precisely, absolutely fine.
Atmosphere fully instead of playing on computers in front of the screen using a mouse and a keyboard. People will actually be able to
Good, just hits a bit more vocab, a mouse and a keyboard, good stuff.
well completely immerse into this atmosphere of gaming and then imagine or like feel themselves like in this kind of atmosphere, like they're in a game.
Feel themselves, bit strange. Feel as though. I don't know if we need this themselves. Okay, thank you. That is the end of the test. All right, so let's get into some scores. A very, very, very impressive performance. I'm sure we'll all agree with that. The exact score we might disagree with. Looking at the comments, I saw some people going as low as 7, and I saw some people going as high as 8.5. Nobody awarded the 9. Nobody awarded less than a 7. So everyone agrees that Vadim is either C1 or C2. For me, he is not the lower end of C1. If you gave Vadim a band 7 for this, I think you are off. Okay, fluency and coherence. I'm going to do the easy ones first. Let's do the easy ones first. Lexical resource, 9. Yay. A full range. Full range of vocab, including lots of lesser known items. Very accurate use of collocation and nice range of formal and informal. You know, some questions demand more formal vocab and some questions demand less formal vocab. You know, Vadim's register was in that neutral thing where he was able to heighten it or to make it lower, using words like low key and things like this, stand out, but then also going up to like refrain from their sedentary lifestyle. So he showed good flexibility with register. For me, just absolutely fine with lexical resource. There were cases where maybe just 1 or 2 cases where it felt like Vadim was, you know, consciously trying to use tricky vocab. Only 2 cases maybe, and you just don't need to do that. Your vocab is already at band 9. Forget about trying to, you know, make it even better or make it flowery or anything like that. Your vocab is superb. Keep it up. Incredible. Grammatical range and accuracy. Are we at the 9 for this? So those mistakes with present perfect, I can say that these are not mistakes that are typical of an L1 user. And for that reason, even though I think you have incredible accuracy and really good range, I'm awarding the 8 instead of the 9. So you have an amazing variety of simple and complex structures. The majority of your sentences are completely error-free. You use a range of sentences, all of that stuff which is necessary for those higher bands. There may be a slight problem with present perfect versus past simple. It's the only thing that I see, and it's not just one mistake, but because I noticed that mistake, you know, at least 3 times I would say, yeah, it's a mistake, and maybe once or twice where I thought, well, maybe it's not the most appropriate. I know it's harsh. I do feel like you have C2 level grammar, but I'm awarding the 8 for this. Pronunciation, I'm also going to award an 8, even though, oh, you could be a 9. The first time I listened, I thought maybe there isn't enough connected speech, or maybe there isn't enough emotive range. But listening back, maybe there is enough intonation. You know, we don't need to be actors. Oh, band 8 or band 9 for pronunciation. And I'm also on the fence with this fluency and coherence. Actually, for fluency and coherence, I'm going to award the 9. And then for pronunciation, I'm going to award the 8. Cool. So let's get into it. So, you develop. So, you stay on topic for all or the vast majority of questions. You generally answer directly and support your answers with sophistication, let's say. So when I say that with sophistication and with flexibility, sometimes you use evidence, sometimes you use examples, sometimes you paraphrase and explain what you mean. I think you have a good variety of ways of developing your answers. Perhaps part two was slightly what I will call front loaded, where a lot of the information was at the beginning and then it felt like you were tagging things on at the end. And perhaps your fluency dipped slightly when you were challenged in part three. Slightly. But for me, the way that you organize your thoughts, it's very clear. You can be understood effortlessly. Your ideas are generally, apart from maybe one or two slight cases, your ideas are on topic. You support them well. You can speak at length without any difficulty at all. It appears to be the case. For me, it is closer to 8.5, but because I'm kind of on the fence with both fluency and with pronunciation and a little bit with grammar, I definitely feel like 8.5 is the score that you deserve overall. And so if I can think of a place to score you another 9, I'll give you that other 9. Pronunciation, you can be understood effortlessly. You use good features of intonation and connected speech. But perhaps there are just some instances where the speech could be slightly more connected and a little, please don't overdo it, a little more emotive range might be useful. As I've mentioned a few times, sometimes when candidates are very, very, very well prepared, this can affect their pronunciation because, like, they've been answering these IELTS questions a million times, and suddenly they're in the test and they're just rattling off their answers. Like, I'm from the UK and I've been living there for 5 years because I really like this place and it's a wonderful place. Like, sometimes it feels like when you've answered the same question time and time and time and time again, you lose that spontaneous nature of pronunciation. Sometimes that can be the case. But okay. I think what we can all agree on, even if you scored the candidate 8.0 or if you scored the candidate 8.5, what we can all agree on is that Vadim is a very, 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 very impressive user of English. For me, 8.5, if he got an 8 in the test, I wouldn't be massively surprised if he got an 8. But I expect Vadim to get 8.5. Can he go and get that 9? It's tough, right? There are a number of reasons why it's difficult to get a band 9. I won't go into those reasons now. But it's tough to get a band 9. I do know a few people who got band 9 in speaking, and certainly Vadim appears to be, close to their level. So if he got a band 9, I would be very, very happy for him. But for me, if you get band 8, band 8.5, you should be super proud of yourself. Areas of improvement, as I mentioned before, perhaps your prep, maybe, perhaps your prep for part 2 could be a little better. Making sure that we're taking notes that help you to get through the full 2 minutes so that we're not like freestyling at the end so much, maybe. And I don't know, these are just little suggestions. You definitely don't need to worry about adding extra difficult or, let's say, high level vocab. I think the natural vocab that you use that emerges from you is good enough to get a band 9. And certainly I don't want you to focus on like, oh, what extra vocab could I use? How could I heighten or enhance my vocab even more? Don't worry about this. A little grammatical work on present perfect versus past simple, especially maybe a little bit of practice with narrative tenses, might also be useful. I hope you get the 9. just be careful with that present perfect versus past simple in your grammar, and I think you will get the 9. Getting 9 for everything is going to be tough, but yeah. Anyway, I hope I don't have many areas of improvement for you, Vadim. I'm very sorry, but you've already kind of completed English. Awesome, amazing, incredible performance. Well done, really well done. Yeah, so those are my thoughts. For me, Vadim deserves a score of 8.5. I don't think any examiner would give him 7.5. He's certainly at that 8.0, 8.5 level. Maybe not quite enough for a 9. But let me know what you think. If you think I've misscored Vadim, please do let me know. And also, if you would like to be a candidate and have, wow, 1 hour, and have all of this feedback on your speaking so you can understand exactly why you deserve the score that I think you deserve, then you can request this on my Telegram channel, Expert Examiner. I also do IELTS writing checks where I give feedback on, explaining why I give the scores that I give for writing. So if you'd like to be a candidate, either by submitting writing or by appearing in a video and having a speaking test like this, more information can be found on my Telegram channel, Expert Examiner. A link to this Telegram channel is given in the description below. More videos coming soon, but for now, bye.